At the core of every radiant thought lies a seed of wisdom. Ralph Waldo Emerson, a giant among philosophers and poets, invites us to delve into the realm of prudence in his timeless work, Prudent Wisdom. Imagine a universe where each decision is intricately woven with the fabric of wisdom, where every step becomes a dance of grace and discernment. Through his vivid prose and transcendent insights, Emerson guides us across the landscapes of the human soul, illuminating pathways that lead to a life rich in consciousness and fulfillment. From the dusty annals of history to the vibrant salons of the mind, Emerson teaches us that prudence is not merely caution in action, but clarity in thought. Each of his words serves as a clarion call to push the boundaries of our beliefs, to challenge complacency, and to embrace truth with unwavering courage. In this text, you will encounter not only the insights of a profound thinker, but also the echoes of a soul committed to the pursuit of knowledge and virtue. Join us on this journey through Prudent Wisdom, where each chapter shines as a beacon, illuminating a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world we inhabit. Prepare to be enchanted by the eternal wisdom of Emerson, where every pause is a whisper from the universe and each reflection ignites the soul. Welcome to Prudent Wisdom, where the art of living transforms into a graceful dance of wisdom and serenity, guided by the masterful pen of one of literature and thought's greatest luminaries. The value of the experience of the Lords of Life. I have witnessed the Lords of Life pass in their awe-inspiring and enigmatic forms, utilizing surprise and profound utility. The surface and the dream unfold in rapid spectral succession, presenting erroneous characters devoid of language. The omnipresent inventor of the game, nameless yet ever-present, some to be seen, others to be imagined, traverses from east to west. The small man, dwarfed by his towering guardians, walks between their legs with a bewildered gaze, clutching nature's hand. Kind and strong, nature whispers, "Don't worry. Tomorrow they will don another face. You are the founder of your race, and where we stand in a series whose ends we do not know, and we believe there are none." We wake up and find ourselves on a staircase. There are stairs below us that we seem to have climbed, and stairs above us, many that ascend and fade out of sight. But the genius, who according to ancient belief stands at the door through which we enter and gives us a drink so that we tell stories to each other, has mixed the cup too strongly, and now we cannot help ourselves. Lethargy sets in at noon, and the dream remains throughout life. Around our eyes, like night hanging over the day in the branches of the fir tree, everything swims and glows. Our life is not as much threatened as our perception. We glide like ghosts through nature, and we should not recognize our new place. Perhaps our birth was the result of a crisis of indigence and frugality in nature, which was so sparing with its fire and so liberal with its earth that it seems we lack the affirmative principle. And although we have health and reason, we have no surplus spirit for new creation. We have just enough to live and get through the year, but not an ounce to transmit or invest. If our genius were a bit more generous, we are like the millers on the lower levels of a stream, where the upstream mills have exhausted the water. We also think those upstream must have lifted their dams. If any one of us knew what we were doing or where we were going, then upon further reflection, we would know. Today we don't know whether we are busy or idle. In moments when we believed ourselves idle, we later discovered that many things had been accomplished. Many had begun within us. All our days seem so unproductive over time that it is amazing where and when we acquired what we call wisdom, poetry, virtue. We never had them on any day of the calendar. Some celestial days must have been intercalated somewhere, like those Hermes won from the moon at dice for Osiris. It is said that all martyrs appeared petty while they were suffering. Every ship is a romantic object, except the one we are sailing on. If we embark, romance abandons our vessel and clings to every other sail on the horizon. Our lives seem trivial, and we avoid recording them. Men seem to have learned from the horizon the art of perpetual retreat and reference. These highlands are rich pastures, and my neighbor has a fertile meadow. But my field, says the farmer, only sustains the world. I quote the words of another man. Unfortunately, this other man retreats in the same manner and quotes me. It is nature's trick to devalue the present day. A good deal of humming, and somewhere a result magically slips in. All roofs are pleasant to look at until they are raised. Then we encounter tragedies and wailing women, hard-eyed husbands, and devastating floods. And men ask, what are the news, as if the old ones were so bad. How many individuals can we count in society? How many actions? How many opinions? Much of our time is preparation, much of it is routine, and much is retrospection. The marrow of every man's genius contracts in very few hours. The history of literature takes the net result of Tiraboschi, Wharton, or Schlegel in a sum of very few ideas and very few original accounts. All the rest is variation on these. So in this great society that surrounds us, a critical analysis would find very few spontaneous actions. Almost everything is custom and common sense, and even fewer opinions, and those seem organic in the speakers and do not disturb the universal need. What opium is instilled? Every disaster seems formidable as we approach it, but in the end, there is no rough friction, only a smooth surface. We fall gently into a thought, like dew softly on the heads of men walking high with tender feet, walking so softly. People grieve and lament, but it is not half as much as they say. There are states of mind in which we court suffering, hoping that at least here we will find reality, the sharp peaks and ridges of truth, but it turns out to be a stage set and a counterfeit. The only thing pain has taught me is how superficial it is. Like everything else, it plays at the surface and never leads me to the reality for which we would even pay the high price of children and lovers. Who discovered that bodies never touch? Well, souls never touch their objects either. An undeniable sea slides with silent waves between us and the things we are headed toward and converse with. Pain, too, makes us idealists. With the death of my son more than 2 years ago, it seems to me that I lost a beautiful property. I can no longer have him near me. If tomorrow I were informed of the bankruptcy of my main debtors, the loss of my assets would be a great inconvenience for me, perhaps for many years, but it would leave me just as it found me, neither better nor worse. The same goes for this calamity. It does not affect me. Something I believed to be a part of myself, which I thought could not be torn away without tearing me apart or expanded without enriching me, detaches itself from me and leaves no scar. It was ephemeral. It pains me that suffering cannot teach me anything or lead me a step closer to true nature. The Indian on whom a curse was cast, so that the wind does not blow on him, the water does not flow toward him, and the fire does not burn him, is an example of all of us. The dearest events are like summer rain, and the shelters for which they pour every drop. All that remains for us is death. We look at it with shaded satisfaction, saying that at least there is a reality that does not deceive us. I consider this evanescence and slipperiness of all objects, which allows them to slip through our hands when we grasp them most firmly, to be the most unaesthetic aspect of our condition. Nature does not like being observed, and she enjoys making us her fools and playmates. We may have the sphere as our cricket ball, but not a fence for our philosophy. She has never given us the power to make direct hits. All our blows are oblique, all our successes accidental. Our relationships with each other are oblique and fortuitous. The dream leads us to more dreaming, and the illusion has no end. Life is a train of states of mind, like a string of beads, and as we pass through them, they reveal themselves to be lenses of many colors that paint the world with their own hue, and each shows only what is in its focus. From the mountain, one sees the mountain. We animate what we can, and we see only what we animate. Nature and books belong to the eyes that see them. It depends on the mood of the man whether he will see the sunset or the sublime poem. There are always sunsets, and there is always genius, but only a few hours are serene enough for us to savor nature or critique. More or less depends on the structure or temperament. Temperament is the wire on which the beads are strung. What good are fortune or talent to a cold, defective nature? Who cares about the sensitivity or discernment a man may have shown at one moment if he falls asleep in his chair, if he laughs or scoffs, if he excuses himself or is infected by selfishness, if he thinks of his dollar, if he cannot go get his food, or if he fathered a child in his youth? What is the use of genius if the organ is too convex or too concave and cannot find a focal point in the real horizon of human life? What use is it if the brain is too cold or too hot and the man cares too little about results to stimulate experience and sustain it within himself? Or if the network is too finely woven, too sensitive to pleasure and pain, so that life stagnates by too much reception without adequate output? What is the point of making heroic vows of amendment if the same lawbreaker must fulfill them? What joy can religious feeling produce when one suspects it secretly depends on the seasons of the year and the state of the blood? I once knew an ingenious doctor who found the creed in the bile duct and often claimed that if the liver was sick, the man became a Calvinist, and if that organ was healthy, he became a Unitarian. It is a very mortifying experience to discover that some excess or disagreeable folly neutralizes the promise of genius. We see young people who owe us a new world. They promise it so easily and generously that they never repay that debt. They die young and escape the settlement, or if they live, they lose themselves in the crowd. Temperament also fully enters into the system of illusions and traps us in a glass prison that we cannot see. There is an optical illusion in every person we meet. In truth, they are all creatures of a certain temperament, appearing in a determined character, whose limits they will never exceed. But we look at them, and they seem alive, and we assume there is an impulse within them. The moment that seems like an impulse in the year in life turns out to be a certain uniform melody that the revolving cylinder of the music box must play. Men resist this conclusion in the morning, but adopt it by the end of the day, namely, that temperament prevails over everything, time, place, and condition, and that it is inextinguishable in the flames of religion. The moral sense serves to impose some modifications, but the individual texture maintains its dominance, if not to bend moral judgments, at least to fix the measure of activity and pleasure. I thus express the law as perceived from the platform of ordinary life, but I must not leave it without warning of the crucial exception, for temperament is a power that no man is willing to praise, except for himself. On the platform of physics, we cannot resist the contrary influences of what is called science. Temperament overrides all divinity. I know the mental inclination of doctors. I hear the laughter of phrenologists, kidnappers, and theoretical slave traders. They consider every man as the victim of another who turns him around his finger, knowing the law of his being, and from clues as trivial as the color of his beard or the inclination of his occiput, they read the inventory of his fortunes and character. The coarsest ignorance is not as repugnant as this brazen knowledge. Doctors say they are not materialists, but they are. For them, the mind is just refined or extremely fine matter. Yet the definition of the spiritual should be that which is self-evident. What notions do they give to love and religion? One hesitates to speak these words in front of them for fear they will profane them. I once saw a gentleman who tailored his conversation to the shape of his interlocutor's head. I had thought that the value of life lay in its unfathomable possibilities, in the fact that one never knows, when addressing a new individual, what might happen to us. I carry the keys to my castle in my hand, ready to throw them at the feet of my Lord, whenever and in whatever disguise he may appear. I know he is in the vicinity, hidden among the vagabonds. Must I anticipate my future by taking a high seat and gently tailoring my conversation to the shape of heads? When I get to that point, the doctors will buy me for a penny. But, sir, the medical file, the report, the institute, the established facts. I distrust the facts and the inferences. Temperament is the power of veto or limitation. It is the Constitution rightly applied to restrain an excess opposed to the Constitution, but absurdly offered as a barrier to original equity. When virtue is present, all subordinate powers sleep at their level. Or, from nature's perspective, temperament is definitive. I see no escape for man from the links of the chain of physical necessity once trapped in this so-called science. Given such an embryo, such a history must follow. On this platform, one lives in a pigsty of sensualism and soon reaches suicide. But it is impossible that the creative power excludes itself. In every intelligence there is a door that never closes, through which the Creator passes. The intellect in search of absolute truth, or the heart in love with absolute good, intervenes to rescue us, and even a whisper from these higher powers awakens us from our futile struggles with this nightmare. We reject it into its own hell, and we cannot return to such a low state. The secret of illusion lies in the necessity of a succession of states of mind or objects. We would like to anchor, but the anchor is in quicksand. This trick of nature is too strong for us. When I look at the moon and the stars at night, I seem still, and they rush by. Our love for the real draws us toward permanence, but bodily health consists of circulation, and mental health in variety or ease of association. We need a change of objects. Devotion to one thought quickly becomes odious. We stray with the mad and must satisfy them. Then the conversation fades. Once I delighted so much in Taine that I thought I would never need another book, Before that, it was Shakespeare, then Plutarch, then Plato, at one time Bacon, then Rousseau, even Betan. But now, I flip through their pages with indifference. Though I still appreciate their genius, it is the same with paintings. Each one receives attention that it cannot hold. Although we would like to remain satisfied in this way, I strongly feel that once you have truly seen a painting, you must say goodbye. You will never see it again. I have received good lessons from paintings that I later saw without emotion or comment. One must deduct from the opinion that even the wise express about a new book or new events, for their opinion gives me news of their state of mind and a vague conjecture about the new fact. But it cannot be trusted as the lasting relationship between that intellect and that thing. The child asks, "Mother, why don't I like the story as much as when you told it to me yesterday?" Ah, child, the same is true of the oldest cherubim of knowledge. But to answer your question is to say, because you were born for a whole and this story is a particularity. The reason for the pain this discovery causes us, and we make it late in relation to works of art and intellect, is the weight of tragedy that whispers about it. With people, friendship and love, this immobility and lack of elasticity that we find in the arts, we find with more pain in the artist. There is no power of expansion in men. Our friends present themselves to us early as representatives of certain ideas that they never surpass. They stand on the edge of the ocean of thought and power, but never take the single step that would lead them into it. A man is like a piece of labradorite that shows no sparkle when turned in the hand until it is viewed from a specific angle. Then it reveals deep and beautiful colors. There is no universal adaptability or applicability in men, but each has his special talent, and the mastery of successful men consists in skillfully maintaining themselves where and when that talent must be practiced. We do what we must, and we call it by the best names we can, and we would like the praise of having claimed the result that occurs. I cannot remember any form of man that is not superfluous at times, but isn't that deplorable? Isn't life worth taking just to perform tricks? Of course, it takes the whole of society to give the symmetry we seek. The party's color wheel must spin very fast to appear white. One also gains something by conversing with so much folly and defect. In the end, let him who loses lose, we are always on the winning side. Divinity is also behind our failures and follies. Children's works are nonsense, but very educational nonsense. So it is with greater and more solemn things like commerce, government, church, marriage. So it is with the story of every man's bread and the paths by which it must come. Like a bird that never settles but hops perpetually from branch to branch, this power does not reside in any man or woman, but speaks at one moment through this one, at another moment through that one. But what use are these subtleties or pedantries? What is the use of thought? Life is not dialectical. I believe that in our time we have had enough lessons on the uselessness of criticism. Our young people have thought and written much about work and reform, and despite all they have written, neither the world nor they have advanced a step. The intellectual tasting of life will not replace muscular activity. A man who considers the delicacy of the passage of a piece of bread down his throat will starve. On the farm of education, the noblest theory of life sat on the most noble figures of young men and women, powerless and melancholic enough. They neither raked nor tossed a ton of hay nor scrubbed a horse, leaving men and girls pale and hungry. A political speaker cleverly compared the promises of our parties to western roads that began quite majestically, with trees planted on either side to tempt the traveller, but quickly narrowed and ended in a squirrel trail up a tree. So it is with culture for us. It ends in a headache. Life seems unspeakably sad and barren for those who, a few months ago, were dazzled by the splendor of the promises of the times. Now there is no right course of action left, nor any devotion in itself among the torments of objections and criticism. We have had enough. There are objections to every mode of life and action, and practical wisdom deduces an indifference to the omnipresence of objection. The whole frame of things preaches indifference. Notice, do not become obsessed with thought, but attend to your affairs. Everywhere, life is neither intellectual nor critical, but robust. Its chief good is for well-balanced people who can enjoy what they find without questioning it. Nature hates spying, and our mothers speak of their good sense when they say, "Children, eat your food and say nothing." Filling the hour, that is happiness. Filling the hour and leaving no room for regret or approval. We live among surfaces, and the true art of life is to skate well upon them. Under the oldest and youngest conventions, a man of native strength thrives as well as in the newest world, thanks to competence in management and handling. He can stabilize himself anywhere. Life itself is a mixture of force and form and will not bear the slightest excess of either. Finish the moment. Find the end of the journey at every step of the way. Live the greatest number of pleasant hours. That is wisdom. Only fanatics or mathematicians say that life's brevity isn't worth caring about, whether in that short span we were scattered in misery or sat on high, for our concern is with moments. Let us note that 5 minutes today are worth as much as 5 minutes of the next millennium. Let us be ready and wise, and let us be ourselves today. Treat men and women well. Treat them as if they are real, perhaps they are. Men live in their fantasy like drunkards whose hands are too soft and shaky for successful work. It is a storm of fantasies, and the only ballast I know is respect for the present hour, without the slightest shadow of doubt. Amid this whirl of spectacles and politics, I am more and more convinced that we must not defer, postpone, or desire, but do justice generously where we are, with whomever we deal, accepting our current companions and circumstances, however humble or odious they may be, as the mystical officers to whom the universe has delegated all its pleasure for us. If these companions are petty and malevolent, their contentment, which is the final victory of justice, offers a satisfying escape for the heart, more than the voice of poets or the occasional sympathy of admirable people. I believe that even if a thoughtful man suffers from the flaws and absurdities of his company, he cannot, without affectation, deny that every gathering of men and women possesses a sensitivity to extraordinary merit. The coarse and frivolous have an instinct for superiority, if not a sympathy for it, and they honor it in their blind and capricious way with sincere homage. The refined youth despise life, but in me, and in those who, like me, are free from dyspepsia, for whom a day is a solid and healthy good, there is an excess of courtesy to look upon company with disdain or to weep over it. Sympathy has made me a bit anxious and sentimental, but if I were left alone, I would enjoy each hour for what it brings me, the daily meal, with as much enthusiasm as the oldest gossip at the bar. I am grateful for the small mercies. I compare notes with a friend who expected everything from the universe, and was disappointed when something fell short of the best, and I found that I begin from the opposite end, expecting nothing, and I am always filled with gratitude for moderate goods. I accept the clamor and noise of opposing tendencies. I also find my share in others, even in the tedious. They give a reality to the surrounding canvas that a methodical appearance so fleeting could avoid. In the morning I wake up and find the old world, the woman, the babies, and the mother, Concord and Boston, the old and dear spiritual world, and even the old, dear world not too far away. If we take the good we find without questioning it, we will receive it in abundance. Great gifts are not gained through analysis. All that is good is on its way. The middle region of our being is the temperate zone. We can ascend to the legendary and cold realm of pure geometry and inert science, or descend into that of sensation. Between these extremes lies the equator of life, thought, spirit, poetry, and a narrow belt more. In popular experience, all that is good is on its way. A collector scours every picture shop in Europe searching for a Poussin landscape, a pencil sketch by Salvator, the Transfiguration, the Last Judgment, or the Communion of St. Jerome. And what is as transcendent as those is found on the walls of the Vatican, the Uffizi, or the Louvre, where any standing citizen can see them, not to mention the paintings of nature on every street, the daily sunsets and sunrises, and the ever-present sculpture of the human body. A collector recently purchased at public auction in London for 157 guineas a Shakespeare autograph. But for free, a schoolgirl can read Hamlet and discover secrets of far higher interest than an unpublished work. I believe we will never read more than the most common books, the Bible, Homer, Dante, Shakespeare, and Milton. Then we grow impatient with a life and a planet so public and rush from side to side seeking out corners and secrets. Imagination delights in the craft of the forest, the Indians, the trappers, and the bee hunters. We imagine ourselves as strangers, and not as intimately domesticated on the planet as the wild man, the beast, and the wild bird. But exclusion reaches them too. It reaches the climbing, flying, soaring, feathered, and four-legged man, the fox, the groundhog, the hawk, the snipe, and the great grouse. Seen up close, They have no more root in the deep world than man, and are only superficial tenets of the globe. Then, the new molecular philosophy shows astronomical spaces between atom and atom, showing that the world is all exterior. The middle of the world is best. Nature as we know it is neither saintly, nor are the lights of the church, nor the ascetics or corn-eaters. It shows no favoritism. It comes with eating, drinking, and sinning. Her darlings, the great, the strong, the beautiful, are not the children of our law, do not come out of Sunday school, do not weigh their food, nor scrupulously follow the commandments. If we want to be strong with her strength, we must not harbor such desperate consciences, nor be so concerned with the consciences of other nations. We must establish the present time as strong against all past or future rumors of anger. There are many unresolved matters that are of the utmost importance to resolve, and while they are being resolved, we will continue doing what we are doing. While the debate about the fairness of trade goes on and won't end for another century or two, New and Old England may keep their stores. Copyright law and international copyrights will be discussed, and in the meantime, we will sell our books at the highest price possible. The appropriateness of literature is questioned, the reason for literature, the legality of writing a thought. There is much to say on both sides, and while the struggle intensifies, you, dear scholar, continue your senseless task, adding a line every hour, and in the meantime add another line. The right to land ownership is disputed, property rights and conventions are gathering, and before the vote takes place, tend to your garden and spend your earnings like a spoil or a gift from God, for all serene and beautiful purposes. Life itself is a bubble, skepticism and a dream within a dream. Concede it all, whatever they want. But you, dear child of God, mind your own private dream. You will not lack for mockery and skepticism. There is plenty of it. Stay there in your study and work until others agree on what is to be done. Your illness and insignificant habit demand that you do this or avoid that, but know that your life is a temporary state, a tent for one night. And whether you are sick or healthy, this time will end. You are sick, but you will not get worse, and the universe, which holds you in high esteem, will be the best. Human life consists of two elements, power and form, and the proportion must invariably be maintained if we want it to be smooth and healthy. An excess of either produces harm as detrimental as its deficiency. Everything runs to excess. Every good quality is harmful unless it is mixed, and to carry the danger to ruin, nature overabounds in each man's particularity. Here among the farms we cite scholars as examples of this betrayal. They fall victim to the expression of nature. You who see the artist, the orator, or the poet too closely, and find that their life is no more excellent than that of mechanics or peasants, and that they themselves are victims of partiality, hollow and gaunt, declare them failures, not heroes, but charlatans. You reasonably conclude that these arts are not for man, but that they are a disease. However, nature does not agree. The irresistible nature has made men thus and creates legions more each day. You love the child who reads a book, who gazes at a drawing or a model. But what are those millions who read and contemplate if not budding writers and sculptors? Add a little more of that quality which now reads and sees, and they will take up the pen and the chisel. And if one remembers with what innocence one began to be an artist, one perceives that nature has allied with its enemy. Man is a golden impossibility. The line he must walk is as fine as a hair. The wise man, through excess of wisdom, becomes a fool. How easily, if fate allowed it, could we maintain these beautiful balances forever and adjust ourselves once and for all to the perfect calculation of the reign of cause and effect? On the street and in the newspapers, life seems such a simple matter that resolute determination and adherence to the multiplication table through all climates will ensure success. But soon a day comes, or is it only half an hour, like a whisper of an angel that unsettles the conclusions of nations and years. Tomorrow, everything seems real and angular again. The usual standards are restored. Common sense is as rare as genius. It is the basis of genius. And experience is the hands and feet of every enterprise. And yet, the one who would make this understanding his business would soon go bankrupt. Power follows a different path than the highways of choice and will, traveling through the underground and invisible tunnels and channels of life. It is absurd that we are doctors, diplomats, and respected people. There are no innocents like these. Life is a series of surprises, and it wouldn't be worth taking or maintaining it otherwise. God delights in isolating us every day and hiding the past and the future. We might look around, but courteously, he unfolds before us an impenetrable screen of the purest sky, and another one behind us with the same features. He seems to say, "You shall not remember nor anticipate." All good conversation, manners, and actions come from a spontaneity that forgets customs and makes the moment grand. Nature hates calculators. Her methods are wholesome and impulsive. Man lives by jerks. Our organic movements are so, and the chemical and ethereal agents are wave-like and alternating, and the spirit goes in opposition and never thrives, except in fits of fever. We thrive by chances. Our principal experiences have been by chance. The most attractive class of people are those who are powerful obliquely and not by direct stroke, men of genius, yet not yet credited. We have the joy of their light without paying too great a tax. Theirs is the beauty of the bird or the morning light, not of art. In the thought of genius there is always a surprise and a feeling, morally well called novelty, because it never becomes less new to the oldest intelligence than to the child. The kingdom that comes without observation. In the same way, for practical success, there should not be too much conception. A man will not be noticed when he does what he knows best. There is a certain magic in his most fitting action that stuns your powers of observation, so that even if it happens before you, you do not realize it. The art of life has a caution and does not show itself. Every man is an impossibility until he is born. Everything is impossible until we observe the success accomplished. The ardors of piety finally coincide with the coldest skepticism that nothing is of us nor of our works, that all is of God. Nature does not spare us the smallest laurel leaf. All writing comes from the grace of God, and so does all we do and have. It would willingly be moral and keep the due limits that I dearly love and would grant the most to man's will. But I have put my heart into the honesty of this chapter, and in the end, I can only see in success or failure more or less of the vital force supplied from the eternal. The results of life are incalculable and cannot be calculated. The years teach many things that the days never know. The people who make up our company converse, come and go, conceive and execute many things, and something comes out, an unexpected result. The individual is always wrong. He has conceived many things and drawn others as helpers. He has consulted with some or with all. He has often been mistaken, and something happens despite it all. All move forward a little, but the individual is always wrong, arriving at something new and very different from what he had promised himself. The ancients, impressed by this irreducibility of human life elements, exalted chance into a divinity, but this is lingering too long on the spark that truly shines at a point. Yet the universe is warm with the same fire, the miracle of life that will expose us but remain always a miracle, introducing a new element, the growth of the embryo. Sir Everard Home, I believe, realized that evolution did not proceed from a central point, but from 3 or more points coactively. Life has no memory. What proceeds in succession may be recalled, but what is coexistent or ejected from a deeper cause, far from being conscious, does not know its own tendency. So it is with us now, skeptics or without unity, for we are immersed in forms and effects that seem of equal but hostile value. And now, religious as we receive the spiritual law, we must endure these distractions. This coexistent growth of the parts will one day become members and obey a single will. In this single will, in this secret cause, we fix our attention and hope. Life thus melts into a new expectation or a religion. Beneath the inharmonious and trivial details, there is a musical perfection, the ideal that always travels with us. The sky without rifts or seams. There is nothing more to observe than the way our illumination occurs when I converse with a profound mind, or when at a given moment, alone with good thoughts, I do not immediately reach satisfaction as when I am thirsty and drink water, or go to the fire when I am cold. But at first, it informs me of my closeness to a new and excellent region of life. By persisting in reading or reflection, this region reveals more of itself. To speak in flashes of light, in sudden discoveries of its profound beauty and quiet, as if the clouds covering it parted at intervals and showed the approaching traveler the inner mountains with the eternal peaceful meadows spread at their base, where flocks graze and shepherds sing and dance. But every vision of this realm of thought feels like a beginning and promises a continuation. I do not arrive there and contemplate what was already there. I either make or do not applaud with childlike joy and wonder at the first opening for me of this august ancient magnificence, with the love and homage of countless ages, young with the life of life, the brilliant Mecca of the desert. And what future opening I feel! A new heart beats with the love of new beauty. I am ready to die out of nature and be reborn in this new and still unreachable America that I have found in the West. For neither now nor yesterday did these thoughts begin, which have never been nor can ever be. A man finds himself at his first entry, knowing that if I have described life as a flow of states of mind, I must now add that there is something in us that does not change, and that classifies all sensations and states of mind. Consciousness in every man is a sliding scale that now identifies him with the first cause and then with the flesh of his body, life upon life in countless degrees. The feeling from which it arises determines the dignity of every act, and the question is always not what you have done or left undone, but by whose order you did or stopped it. Fortune, Minerva, the Muse, and the Holy Spirit are picturesque men too limited to cover this boundless substance. This perplexed intellect must kneel before this cause that refuses to be named, an ineffable cause that every good genius has tried to represent with some eloquent symbol, as with water by Anaximenes, with air by Anaxagoras, with thought by Zoroaster, with fire by Jesus, and by the moderns with love, and each metaphor has become a national religion. The Chinese Mencius had no success in his generalization. I perfectly understand the language, he said, and nourish in the best way my vast vigor. I allow myself to ask what you call your vast vigor, said his companion. The response of Mencius was, this vigor is extremely great and unyielding to the highest degree. Nourish it properly and do not harm it, and it will fill the void between heaven and earth. This vigor aligns with and upholds justice and reason, and does not let hunger infiltrate our most correct writing. We give this generalization the name of being, and thus we confess that we have reached as far as we can go. It is enough for the joy of the universe that we have not reached a wall, but endless oceans. Our life does not seem as present as it is prospective, not because of the business in which it is wasted, but as an insinuation of this immense flowing vigor. Most of life seems to be merely an advertisement of faculty. We are given information so that we do not sell ourselves cheaply, that we are indeed very great, particularly because our greatness is always in a tendency or direction, not in an action. We must believe in the rule, not the exception. This is how the noble are distinguished from the ignoble. Thus, in accepting direction, it is not a matter of what we believe about the immortality of the soul or something similar, but of the universal impulse to believe that this is the material circumstance and the main fact of the globe's history. We will describe this cause as one that acts directly. The mind is not powerless nor in need of intermediary organs. It has abundant powers and direct effects. I explain myself without explaining. I feel without acting, and I place myself where I am not. That is why all just people are content with their own praise, refuse to explain themselves, and are satisfied with the fact that new actions render them this service. They believe that we communicate without speech and beyond speech, and that none of our just actions stop affecting our friends, no matter the distance, for influence and action are not measured in miles. Why should I worry that I have created a circumstance that prevents my presence where I am expected? If I am not at the meeting, my presence must still be as useful to the community of friendship and wisdom as if I were there. I exert the same quality of power in all places where I travel. The powerful ideal before us has never been seen to fall backward. No man has ever had a complete experience, but his good is the news of a better to come. In moments of liberation, we know that a new image of life and duty is already possible. The elements already exist in many thoughts around you, as a doctrine of life that will transcend any written record we have. The new statement will include both the skepticisms and the beliefs of society, and from the unbelievers, a creed will form. For skepticisms are not free nor without law, but are limitations of the affirmative statement. The new philosophy must embrace them and make assertions beyond them, just as it must include the older beliefs. It is a tragic discovery, though too late to help, that we have made of our existence. This discovery is called the fall of man. Since then, we distrust our instruments. We have learned that we do not see directly but immediately, and that we have no way to correct this colored and distorted vision that we possess, nor to calculate the extent of its errors. Perhaps this vision has a creative power. Perhaps there were no objects before. We lived in what we saw. Now the capacity of this new power, which threatens to absorb all things, engages us. Nature, art, people, letters, religions, and objects rush by in succession, and God is just one of its ideas. Nature and literature are subjective phenomena. All evil and all good are shadows we project. The street is full of humiliations for the proud, just as the fop arranges to dress his lackeys in his livery and make them serve his guests at the table. Likewise, the sorrows that the bad heart emits like bubbles immediately take the form of ladies and gentlemen in the street shops or waiters in hotels, threatening or insulting everything that can be threatened or insulted in us. The same goes for our idolatries. People forget that it is the eye that makes the horizon, and the eye of the mind that makes such or such a man a representative type of humanity, with the name of hero or saint. Jesus, the providential man, is a good man upon whom many agree. These optical laws have the effect, by love on the one hand and by receiving objections pressure on the other, of lasting for a moment where we will look at him at the center of the horizon and attribute to him the properties that belong to every man thus viewed. But the longest love or aversion comes to a swift end. The great and growing self, rooted in absolute nature, has its own relative existence and ruins the kingdom of mortal friendship and love. Marriage in what is called the spiritual world is impossible due to the inequality between each subject and each object. The subject is the receiver of divinity, and in every comparison must feel its being enhanced by this cryptic power. Even if it is not energy, this review of substances can only be felt through presence, and no force of intellect can attribute to the object its own divinity, which always sleeps or awakens in each subject. Never can love make consciousness and attribution equal in strength between the self and the other. There will be the same abyss between the original and the painting as between the self and the other. The universe is the bride of the soul. All private sympathy is partial. Two human beings are like spheres that can only touch at one point, and as long as they remain in contact, all other points of each sphere are inert. Its turn must also come, and the longer a particular union lasts, the more the parts acquire energy of unattached appetite. Life can be imagined but cannot be divided or duplicated. Any violation of its unity would be chaos. The soul has no twin but is begotten unique, and though it reveals itself as a child in time, a child in appearance, it is of a fatal and universal power that admits no daily compromise nor act that betrays the ill-disguised divinity. We believe in ourselves as we do not believe in others. We allow ourselves everything, and what we call sin in others is experimentation for us. This is an example of the faith we have in ourselves. The fact that men never speak of crime with the levity they believe, or that every man thinks it safe for himself to have latitude where no case should be allowed to another. The act has a very different aspect inside and outside, in its quality and in its consequences. In the mind of the murderer, murder is not as ruinous as poets and romantics would have it. It neither disturbs nor troubles his ordinary attention to trivialities. It is quite easy to contemplate, but in its wake it reveals itself to be a horrible entanglement and confusion of all relations. Especially crimes arising from love seem correct and just from the actor's point of view, but when committed they are destructive to society. No man finally believes he can lose himself, nor that the crime within him is as black as in the delinquent, for the intellect qualifies moral judgments in our case. For the intellect there is no crime that is antagonistic or unique, and it judges right as it does fact. Worse than a crime, it is a mistake, Napoleon said, speaking in the language of the intellect. To him, the world is a problem of mathematics or the science of quantity, and he sets aside praise and blame, along with all weak emotions. All theft is comparative if it reaches the absolutes. Who does not steal? The saints are sad, for they contemplate sin even when speculating from the perspective of conscience and not the intellect, a confusion of thought. Sin viewed from thought is a diminishment, even less when seen from conscience or will. This praise or evil, the intellect calls it shadow, absence of light, not essence. Conscience must feel it as essential misessence. It has no objective but subjective existence. Thus, inevitably, the universe adorns itself with our color, and each object successively falls into the subject itself. The subject exists and extends. All things eventually find their place. As I am, I see. Let us use whatever language we wish. We will never be able to say more than what we are. Hermes, Cato, Columbus, Newton, and Bonaparte are ministers of the mind. Instead of feeling poor when encountering a great man, let us treat the newcomer like a traveling geologist who crosses our land and shows us good shale, limestone, or anthracite in our wild pastures. The partial action of every strong mind in one direction is like a telescope pointed at the objects in its path, but every other part of knowledge must be pushed to the same extravagance before the soul attains its due happiness. Look at that kitten gracefully chasing its own tail. If you could see through its eyes, you would see it surrounded by hundreds of figures with tragic and comic affairs, long conversations, many varied characters, the vicissitudes of fate, and in the meantime, it is just the kitten and its tail. How much longer will it be before our masquerade ends with the noise of drums, laughter, and cries, and we discover it was a solitary performance? A subject and an object are both needed to complete the galvanic circuit, but greatness adds nothing, whether it's Kepler and the sphere, Columbus and America, a reader and his book, or the cat and its tail. It is true that all the muses, love, and religion hate these developments, and will find a way to punish the chemist who publicly reveals the laboratory's secrets. We cannot say too much about our constitutional need to see things through private lenses or soaked in our moods. Yet this is the native god of these dark rocks. This need makes the principal virtue self-reliance. We must hold firmly to it, no matter how scandalous this poverty may seem. By means of self-recovery, it becomes more vigorous after the volleys of action, possessing our axis more firmly. The life of truth is cold and thus far dark, but it is not a slave to tears, constraints, or disruptions. It neither tries nor adopts another's facts. It is a primary choice of wisdom to know how to distinguish one's own from others. I have learned that I cannot dispose of the facts of others, but that I hold a key that persuades me against all their negations that they too hold a key to their own. A sympathetic person finds themselves in the dilemma of a swimmer among drowning men, all clinging to them. If they offer a foot or a finger in help, they will be pulled down to the same fate. They want to be saved from the evils of their vices, but not from their vices themselves. Charity will be wasted in this miserable expectation of symptoms. A wise and resolute doctor would give as their first piece of advice: get out of there. In our talkative America, we lose ourselves through our own benevolent nature, and from all sides we hear this conformity that strips us of the power to be useful. A man should not be able to look in any way other than directly and frankly. Preoccupied attention is the only response to the frivolous intrusions of others, an attention and purpose that render their desires frivolous. It is a divine response, leaving no room for appeal or hard thoughts in Plackman's design of the solemnities of Aeschylus. In this prayer, Apollo, while the Furies sleep at the threshold, expresses a shade of sorrow and compassion on the god's face, but remains calm, with the conviction of the irreconcilable nature of the two spheres. He was born into another policy, one of eternity and beauty. The man at his feet asks for his interest in the turmoils of the earth to which his nature cannot belong, and the Erinyes who dwell there pictorially express this disparity. The god is burdened with his divine fate. Illusion, temperament, succession, surface, surprise, reality, and subjectivity are threads on the loom of time. They are the masters of life. I do not dare to give them an order, but I name them as I find them on my path. I know I cannot claim my image is complete. I am a fragment, and this is a fragment of me. I can confidently declare one law or another cast in relief and shape, but I am still a few ages too young to compile a ribbed code for my time in eternal politics. I have seen many fair pictures. I have not lived in vain. I have lived a wonderful time. I am no longer the novice I was at 14, nor the one who asked 7 years ago. What is the fruit? I find private fruit to be enough. It is a fruit for which I should not ask for a quick effect from meditations, advice, or the gathering of truths. It would seem unfortunate to demand a result in this city and county, an obvious effect in the immediate month and year. The effect is deep and secular, as the cause works in periods where mortal life is lost. All I know is reception. I am and I have, but I do not have, and when I thought I had gained something, I found I was only worshipping in wonder at great fortune. My reception has been so great that I do not trouble myself about receiving in abundance this or that. I say to genius, If you allow me the proverb for a mill for a million when I receive a new gift, I do not cancel out my body to balance the account, for if I died, I could not do so. The benefit has surpassed the merit from day one and has continued to do so ever since. Meritism, so-called, considers it as part of the reception. Hence this desire for a manifest practical effect seems to me an apostasy. I am gladly willing to avoid this unnecessary treatment of life. For me, it has a visionary face. The hardest action is also visionary. It is merely a choice between sweet and turbulent dreams. People disdain knowledge and intellectual life. I am content to know if I can know. That is a training for my taste, and only a great deal of time would be enough for me to know a little. That would be worth the expense of this world. I always hear Drastia's law that every soul that has acquired a truth must be protected from harm until another period. I know that the world I converse with in the city and farms is not the world I think I am observing. I notice this difference, and I will one day note it. I will know the value and the law of this divergence, but I have not found much to be gained from the manipulative attempts to realize the world of thought. Many anxious people successively try this way and make themselves ridiculous. They acquire democratic manners, froth at the mouth, hate and renounce, and what's worse, I observe that there is not a single successful example in human history of someone realizing their own experiments of success. I say this polemically or in response to the question, why not realize your world? But it is far from my generation, which prejudges the law by petty empiricism because there has never been a correct effort that did not have a lot of patience, and that will not eventually triumph. We must beware of the deceptions of the element of time. It takes a long time to eat or sleep, or earn $100, and very little time to feed a hope that becomes the light of our life. We adorn our gardens, eat our dinners, talk at home with our wives, and these things make no impression. They are forgotten the next week. But in the solitude to which every man always returns, there is wisdom and revelations that, in their passage to new worlds, will carry them with them. No matter the ridicule, no matter the defeat, the old heart seems to say there is a victory for every justice, and the true romanticism that exists in the world to be realized will be the transformation of genius into practical power. Prudence is a theme that no poet has sung with beautiful pleasure for the old and is distasteful for the young. Do not despise the love of parents and the articles of the arts, the greatness of the perfect sphere thanks to the coagulating atoms. What right do I have to write about prudence, of which I possess little and of a negative kind? My prudence lies in avoiding and renouncing, not in inventing means and methods, nor in skillful direction or gentle repair. I have no skill in spending money well. My genius lies in my economy, and anyone who sees my garden will discover I should have another. Yet I love facts and hate slipperiness and people without perception. Thus, I have as much right to write about prudence as about poetry or sanctity. We write from aspiration and antagonism just as much as from experience. We paint those qualities we do not possess. The poet admires the man of energy and tact. The merchant raises his son for the church or the law, and where a man is neither vain nor selfish, you will find that what he lacks is evident in his praise. On the other hand, it would be dishonest of me not to balance these fine lyrical words of love and friendship with words that carry a harsher tone. And although my debt to my senses is real and constant, I fail to fully acknowledge it. Prudence is the virtue of the senses. It is the science of appearances, the external action of the inner life, God harnessing thought to labor, moving matter according to the laws of matter. It is content with seeking bodily health through adherence to physical conditions and mental health through the laws of intellect. The world of the senses is a world of spectacles. It does not exist by itself, but holds a symbolic character. True prudence, or the law of spectacles, recognizes the coexistence of other laws and knows that its function is subordinate. It understands that where it operates is an innocent surface. Prudence is false when isolated, legitimate when it is the natural history of the incarnated soul, unfolding the beauty of laws within the narrow framework of the senses. There are all degrees of competence in the knowledge of the world. For our present purpose, it is enough to indicate three classes. One class lives for the utility of the symbol, valuing health and wealth as ultimate goods. Another class lives above this mark, appreciating the beauty of the symbol like the poet, the artist, the naturalist, and the scientist. And a third class lives beyond the beauty of the symbol to the beauty of what it signifies. These are the wise. The first class possesses common sense, the second taste, and the third spiritual perception. From time to time, a man spans the entire scale, seeing and enjoying the symbol firmly, and then also appreciating its beauty with a clear eye. Finally, as he pitches his tent on this sacred volcanic island of nature, he does not try to build houses and barns, but rather reveals the brilliance of God glimpsed through a crack or crevice. The world is full of proverbs, deeds, and winks of a vile prudence, a devotion to matter, as if we had no faculties beyond taste, smell, touch, sight, and hearing. A prudence that worships the rule of three but never applies it, that rarely gives, that seldom lends, and only asks one question of every daring project. It is a disease, like the thickening of skin to the destruction of vital organs. But culture, revealing the higher origin of the apparent world and aiming at the perfection of man as an end, degrades everything else, like health and bodily life, into mere means. It considers prudence not as a distinct faculty, but as a name for the wisdom and virtue that preserve the body and its needs. Cultivated men always feel and speak thus, as if a great fortune, the realization of a civil or social measure, great personal influence, or an elegant and commanding speech had their value as evidence of the mind's energies. If a man loses his balance and immerses himself in any profession or pleasure for its own sake, he may be a good player or tenant, but he is not a cultivated man. Speculative prudence, which makes the senses the final word, is the god of fools and cowards, and it is the theme of all comedy. It is nature's play, and therefore literature's. True prudence limits this sensualism by recognizing the existence of an internal and real world. Once that recognition is made, the order of the world and the distribution of affairs and time, studied with the cooperation of their subordinate place, will reward any degree of attention. Our existence, though seemingly tied to nature, to the return of the sun and moon, to the periods that mark climate and country, to social good and evil, to splendor and deprivation, reads all its primary lessons from these books. Prudence does not question the origin of nature. It accepts the laws of the world by which man's being is conditioned as they are, and upholds them to enjoy its own good. It respects space and time, climate, necessity, sleep, and the law of polarity, growth and death, where they turn to give limit and period to its being. Everywhere, the sun and moon, the great formalists of the heavens, are present, and here lies the stubborn matter that will not deviate from its chemical routine. Here is a globe planted, traversed and encircled by natural laws, outwardly divided and distributed by civil partitions that impose new restrictions on its young inhabitant. We eat bread that grows in the fields, breathe the air that blows around us and sometimes poisons us, air that is too cold, too hot, too dry, or too humid. Time, which appears so vacant, indivisible, and divine in its coming, is chopped up and sold in trivialities and scraps. A door must be painted, a lock repaired. I need wood or oil, flour or salt. The house is smoky, or I have a headache, then taxes and dealings with a man without heart or brains, and the sting of an insulting or embarrassing word gnaws at the hours. Do what we may, summer will have its flies. If we walk in the woods, we must feed the mosquitoes. If we go fishing, we must wait under a fine drizzle. Thus, the climate is a great hindrance to idle people. Often we resolve not to care about the weather, but we still watch the clouds, and the rain teaches us. These small experiences that usurp hours and years, the hardness of the soil and 4 months of snow, make the inhabitant of the northern temperate zone wiser and more skillful than the one who enjoys the constant smile of the tropics. The islander may walk about all day at his leisure and sleep at night on a mat under the moon, and wherever a wild palm grows, nature has provided, without even a wish, a table for his morning meal. The northerner, by necessity, becomes a family man. He must prepare, bake, salt and preserve his food, pile up wood and coal. Yet since no single task can be accomplished without new knowledge of nature, and as nature is inexhaustibly insignificant, the inhabitants of these climates have always surpassed the southerners in strength. Such is the merit of these affairs, that a man who knows other things can never know too much, that he possesses precise perceptions. If he has hands, he acts. If he has eyes, he measures and discriminates. He accepts and gathers all the data from chemistry, natural history, and economics. The more one has, the less inclined one is to save. Time always brings opportunities that reveal their worth. Some wisdom emerges from every natural and innocent action. The domestic man, who cherishes the clock in his kitchen and the songs of burning logs in the fireplace as much as music, has comforts that others cannot even imagine. The application of means to ends ensures victory, whether in battle hymns or partisan war tactics. The good husband finds as much method in stacking wood in a shed or harvesting fruit in a storm as in the campaigns of a peninsula or the archives of a State Department. He builds a workbench or places his toolbox in the barn's corner, storing nails, pliers, screwdrivers, and chisels. Here he enjoys the old joys of youth and childhood, the domestic love of attics, wine presses, and corn chambers, and the comfort of long household tasks. His garden or yard tells him many pleasant stories. One could argue for optimism from this abundant flow of bittersweet pleasure in every suburb and end of the good world. If a man obeys the law, whatever it may be, his path will be strewn with satisfactions. There is more difference in the quality of our pleasures than in their quantity. On the other hand, nature punishes any negligence of prudence. If you think the senses are decisive, obey their law. If you believe in the soul, do not cling to sensual sweetness before it ripens on the slow tree of cause and effect. It is like putting vinegar in your eyes. Dealing with names of weak and imperfect perception is like what Dr. Johnson said. If the child says he looked through this window when he actually looked through that one, he must be corrected. Our American character is marked by a more than mediocre pleasure in precise perception, which is manifested in the currency of words. There is no mistake, but the discomfort of unpunctuality, the confusion of thought over facts, the inattention to tomorrow's needs belongs to no nation. The beautiful laws of time and space, once disjointed by our incompetence, become holes and hiding places. If the hive is disturbed by careless and stupid hands instead of honey, it will produce bees. Our words and actions must be timely to be just. A cheerful and pleasant sound is the sharpness of the scythe on June mornings. However, what is more lonely and sad than the sound of the grinder or the whetting stone when it's too late for the hay? Scattered, tardy men spoil much more than their own affairs by spoiling the temper of those they deal with. I recall a critique in certain paintings when I see wandering, unhappy men who are not faithful to their senses. The last great Duke of Weimar, a man of superior intelligence, sometimes remarked in the presence of great works of art, and now especially in Dresden, how much an effect is enhanced by a certain quality that gives life to the figures and to life an irresistible truth. This quality is the accuracy in all the figures we draw from the correct center of gravity. I refer to the posture of the figures, firmly planted on their feet, their hands firmly gripping, and their eyes fixed where they ought to look. Even inanimate objects like vases and stools, as long as they are correctly drawn, lose all effect as soon as they drift from their center of gravity and take on a floating, wobbling appearance. The Raphael in the Dresden Gallery, in the only painting of great effect I've ever seen, is the most tranquil and least passionate work one can imagine, a pair of saints worshipping the Virgin and Child. Yet it produces a deeper impression than the contortions of 10 crucified martyrs, for beyond all the beauty of form, it possesses in high degree the quality of uprightness in all the figures. This uprightness we demand of all the figures in this painting of life, that they stand upright, neither float nor waver, that we know where to find them, that they distinguish between what they remember and what they have dreamed, that they call things by their name, that they give us facts and honor their own senses with confidence. But who will dare to condemn another imprudently? Who is prudent? The men we call the greatest represent a minority in this realm. There is a certain fatal dislocation in our relationship with nature that distorts our ways of living and makes every law our enemy. It seems to have finally stirred all the genius and virtue of the world to reflect on the issue of reform. We must seek counsel from the highest prudence and ask why health, beauty, and genius must now be the exception rather than the rule of human nature. We do not know the properties of plants, animals, or the laws of nature through our sympathy with them. But here again is the dream of poets. Poetry and prudence should coincide. Poets should be lawmakers, meaning that the boldest lyrical inspiration should not reprimand and insult, but announce and direct the civil code and daily work. But now the two seem irreconcilable. We have violated law after law until we find ourselves among ruins, and when, by chance, we glimpse a harmony between reason and phenomena, we are surprised. Beauty should be the dowry of every man and woman as invariably as sensation, but health or good organization are rare. Genius should be the child of genius, and every child should be inspired. But now nothing can be predicted of any child, and nowhere is it pure. We call genius partial half-lights, out of politeness to talent that turns into money, to talent that shines today to dine and sleep well tomorrow. And society is led by party men, as they are rightly called, not by divine men, who use their gifts to refine luxury rather than abolish it. Genius is always ascetic. Piety and love appear to the finest souls as a disease, and they find beauty in the rights and limits that resist it. We have found beautiful names to cover our sensuality, but no gift can elevate intemperance. The talented man affects to call his transgressions of the laws of the senses trivial and considers them compatible with his devotion to his art. His art never taught him lust, nor the love of wine, nor the desire to reap where he had not sown. His art is diminished by every deduction from his holiness, and made lesser with every defect in common sense. He who scorned the world as the scorned world returns the favor, he who despises small things will perish. By right or wrong, Goethe's picture is likely a fairly accurate historical portrait, and that is the real tragedy. It doesn't seem to me as authentic the pain when a tyrant like Richard III oppresses and kills 20 innocents, as when Antony and Tasso, both apparently with reason, destroy each other. One lives by the maxims of this world and is faithful to them. The other is inflamed by all divine sentiments, but clings also to the pleasures of the senses without submitting to their law. It is a pain we all feel, a knot we cannot untie. This is not a rare case in modern biography. A man of genius, of ardent temperament, imprudent with physical laws, self-indulgent, becomes at some point an unhappy man, a quarrelsome one, an embarrassing relative, a thorn to himself and others. The scholar makes us uneasy with his double life, sometimes acting above prudence when it is admirable, but an obstacle when common sense is required. Yesterday, Caesar wasn't so great. Today, the criminal at the foot of the gallows isn't more miserable. Yesterday, radiant with the light of an ideal world where the greatest of men lives, now burdened by the deprivations and sickness he must blame. He resembles the miserable vagabonds travelers describe frequenting the bazaars of Constantinople, hidden all day, yellow, emaciated, in rags, furtive, and at night, when the bazaars open, they slip into the opium shop, swallow their dose and transform into calm, glorified seers. Who hasn't witnessed the tragedy of an imprudent genius struggling for years with miserable financial difficulties, finally sinking on the exhausted, fruitless side, like a giant sacrificed for pins? It is better for a man to accept the early pains and mortifications of this kind, as nature is not indulgent in sending them as clues that he should not expect any good beyond the just fruit of his own labor and self-denial. Health, bread, climate, and social position have their importance, and he will give them their due. Let him consider nature as a perpetual advisor and her perfections as the exact measure of our deviations, making night a night and day a day, controlling the habit of spending, seeing that as much wisdom can be spent in private economy as in an empire, and drawing as much from it. The laws of the world are written for him in every coin in his hand. Nothing is better for him than to understand whether it's poor Richard's wisdom or the street-smart prudence of the State Street, buying acres to sell by the foot, or the farmer's economy of nailing a tree between seasons, for it will grow while he sleeps, or perhaps the imprudence of administering small strokes of the saw, fragments of time, particles of actions, and small profits. The eye of prudence can never close. Iron, if kept at the forge, rusts. Beer, if not brewed in the right atmospheric state, turns sour. The wood of ships rots at sea, or, if kept high and dry, cracks, warps, and dry rots. Money, if hoarded, produces no income and is subject to loss. If invested, it is vulnerable to the depreciation of the particular class of shares. Strike the iron, says the iron, while it's white hot. Keep the rake, says the mower, as close to the scythe as possible and the cart as close to the rake. Our American commerce is reputed to be at the extreme of this prudence. It accepts good banknotes, bad ones, clean and torn ones, and it survives by the speed with which it passes them on. The iron cannot rust, the beer cannot sour, the wood cannot rot, nor can monetary stocks depreciate in the rare and swift moments the American allows any of them to stay in his hands. When skating on thin ice, our safety lies in our speed. Learn a deeper prudence. Learn that all things in nature, even particles and feathers, are governed by law and not by chance, and that what is sown shall be reaped. Through diligence and self-control, ensure your bread is at your disposal, so you won't be in bitter and false relations with other men. For the greatest good of wealth is freedom. Practice the lesser virtues. How much human life is lost in waiting. Don't make your fellow men wait. How many words and promises are just promises of conversation? Let yours be words of destiny. When you see a piece of paper, folded and sealed, floating around the globe on a pine ship, and it arrives safely to the eyes for whom it was written, amidst a crowded population, likewise feel the admonition to integrate into your being through all these distracting forces and maintain a thin human word between storms, distances, and accidents that sway us side to side, and which through persistence allow the faint strength of a man to redeem his promise after months and years in the farthest climates. We must not try to write the laws of a single virtue by only looking at it. Human nature dislikes contradictions. It is symmetrical. The prudence that ensures outward well-being must not be studied by one set of men, while heroism and holiness are studied by another, but they are reconcilable. Prudence refers to the present, to people, goods and existing forms, but as every fact has its roots in the soul, if the soul changes, it would cease to be or become something else. The proper administration of external things will always rest on a right apprehension of its cause and origin. That is to say, the good man will be the wise man, and the single-hearted will be the political man. Every violation of truth is not only a form of suicide for the liar, but also a stab at the health of human society. The most beneficial truth imposes an immediate destructive tax, while frankness invites frankness, puts the parties on equal footing, and turns their dealings into friendship. Trust men, and they will be faithful to you. Treat them with esteem, and they will show themselves to be great, even if they make an exception in your favor to all their business rules, so it is with unpleasant and dreadful things. Prudence is not about avoiding or fleeing, but showing courage. He who wishes to walk the quieter parts of life with some serenity must resolve to face the object of his worst apprehension, and often his firmness will show that his fear was unfounded. The Latin proverb says that in battles, it is first the eye that is conquered. Complete self-mastery can make a battle as little dangerous to life as a fencing match or a football game. Soldiers cite examples of men who have seen the cannon aimed and the fire given and who diverted the trajectory of the ball. The terrors of the storm are confined mostly to the parlor and the cabin. For the farmer or the sailor, it doesn't bother them all day long, and their health renews with a pulse as vigorous under the melting snow as under the June sun. When unpleasant things occur between neighbors, fear takes hold of the heart and amplifies the consequences from the other party, but it is a poor counselor. Every man is truly weak and apparently strong for himself, but appears weak to others. You fear Grim, but Grim also fears you. You worry about the goodwill of the most miserly person and are preoccupied with their ill will, but the most robust disturber of your peace and that of your neighbors is as weak and timid as anyone. The peace of society is often maintained because, as children say, one is afraid and the other dares not. When men are far apart, they swell up, intimidate and threaten. Brought together, they are a weak people. There's a proverb that courtesy costs nothing, but calculation could estimate love for its benefit. It's said that love is blind, but benevolence is necessary for perception. Love is not a blindfold over the eyes, but a wash for the eyes. If you find yourself facing a sectarian or hostile partisan, never acknowledge the dividing lines, but always find what common ground remains. If only the sun shines and the rain falls for both of you, the area will quickly expand, and before you know it, the boundary mountains on which your gaze was fixed will have melted into the air. If you set out to dispute, St. Paul will lie, and St. John will hate. What kind of base, poor, miserable, and hypocritical people make a quarrel over the religion of pure and chosen souls? They will drag, shout, cough, and hide, pretending to concede here just to boast and win there, without enriching any part of thoughts, nor emotions of courage, modesty, or hope. So do not put yourself in a false position with your contemporaries by letting a vein of hostility and bitterness erupt, even if your views are in frank opposition to theirs. Assume an identity of sentiment, assume you say exactly what everyone thinks, and let the flow of ingenuity and love unfold your paradoxes into a solid column. In the weakness of a doubt, you will at least achieve an adequate release. The natural movements of the soul are far better than the voluntary ones, which will never do you justice in the dispute. Thought is not then grasped by its proper handle. It doesn't show itself proportioned in its true trajectories, but gives a coerced, hoarse and half-expressed testimony. But suppose a consent, and soon it will be granted to you, for truly, beneath their external diversities, all men are of one heart and one mind. Wisdom will never let us be at war with any name. We reject sympathy and intimacy with people as if we were expecting a superior sympathy and intimacy. But from where and when? Tomorrow will be like today. Life is spent while we prepare to live. Our friends and work associates drift away from us. We can hardly say we see new men or women coming toward us. We are too old to follow fashion, too old to hope for the patronage of someone greater or more powerful. We aspire to the sweetness of those effects that grow around us. These old shoes are easy on the feet. Undoubtedly, we can easily choose the floors of our company, murmuring more proud and flattering names for fancy. The imagination of each man has its friends, and life would be more costly with such companions. But if you cannot have them on mutual good terms, you cannot have them at all. If it is not divinity, it is our ambition that shapes new relationships. Their virtue evaporates like strawberries, losing their flavor in garden beds. Thus, truth, frankness, courage, love, humanity, and all virtues are situated on the side of prudence or the art of ensuring present well-being. I do not know if it will eventually be discovered that all matter is made of a single element like oxygen or hydrogen, but the world of manners and actions is made of a single substance, and starting from there, surely we will murmur our 10 commandments in no time.